Welcome to the Mindset by Design podcast with your host, the expert Andy Murphy, where you will learn the tips, tricks, and strategies he teaches his world-class clients to give you the skills to dominate any business.
What's going on, Mindset by Design crew, and welcome to episode 238. Hope you're amazing as always. I really do, you know. Last day of July, crazy. How crazy? In a good way. And, when I get to the end of a month, it's like when I'm hitting birthdays and New Year and Christmas. I like to sit back a little the last couple of days, and that doesn't mean I'm not still working hard. I am. But I like to ponder a bit more, my brain, and really just take time out to be present and think, because I like to look back on the month. And if you don't do this, maybe it's something you should think about, because I like to look back on the month and really reflect who I've been, the emotional roller coaster that we go on being entrepreneurs and just life in general. What was I personally doing that worked? What was I personally doing that didn't work? How close was I to hitting certain goals in business and health and life? Did I move that needle forwards every day? What is going on in my business that I like? Am I going closer to the goal, or am I going off on a random tangent because something came in? Do you know what I mean? I love to reflect. And maybe you're starting to do the same as you're listening to this. But you should be, because what I teach and what I love to teach is something called chunking. And that's a very British way of saying it, chunking. It's pronounced chunking. So chunking up and chunking down. But we want things into manageable bite-sized pieces, and we can chunk right down into the next detail that we're about to do, or the next thought, and we can chunk right up into the end of our life, or we can chunk in different ways, right? Chunking up, chunking down. So when I'm doing weeks, I'm focused on the week. When I'm doing a day, I'm focused on the day. When I'm doing the hour, I'm focused on the hour. But I also take each month as that's my mission, right? That's my mission. I'm not thinking about next month. Well, I am today because it's tomorrow, but besides that, in general, no, I'm setting very clear goals and vision for that month. And then I'm going after that month. Because otherwise what happens is we can be too focused on the big picture, and that big picture, man, there's a lot of details that go into that big picture, right? Different people that have got to come in, different ways you've got to start thinking, different software, you get the idea, right? It's a lot of details. So what do you think a lot of details can do that you're not controlling because you're not at that stage in the business yet? What do you think they do in the brain? Yeah, you got it. It creates overwhelm. And that really then is linked to procrastination. It holds ourselves back. And unless we've got true clarity around where we're going, then how do you chunk down into the mini detail that you're about to do next? Because often what we can do is get caught up in that chaos in our brain of spinning in circles, pretending or tricking ourselves with dopamine hits that we're actually creating movement, action, right? We're actually creating momentum. But oftentimes we're not. We're just not. There's an old saying, I love it. And I'm going to butcher the saying, but it was actually a quote I saw years ago, and I've used it many times. A rocking horse creates movement, but it doesn't mean you're going anywhere. Right? And that's not the quote, but it's my version of the quote. Think about that, right? You can use all your effort and time and energy rocking back and forwards. Feels like you're moving, right? It feels like you're going somewhere, but you're not. And so that becomes the problem in creating momentum and getting results in life and business, right? So I want you to be careful of that. So anyway, as you can tell, I'm going on a bit of a rant. I jumped into this today. Yeah, I really hope it helped. Just start thinking about things in blocks of time, blocks of energy, and connected to different emotion. I get it also that I just jumped in and started ranting. But that was coming out, so I thought I'd share it with you. But hopefully you really liked episode 237, how cities and noise could be killing you and your business. I had a lot of good feedback about that one. And if you've not listened to it or watched it on YouTube, guess what? You're missing out. It's a goodie. Broke down an awesome study, and it was quite shocking for me. It was quite shocking because you could probably hear on the episode lots of banging, and it's crazy. Today, it's silent outside. So that's again, do we create our reality? Well, it's a topic we're going to get into today. Yeah, the topic you might have seen by the title, but it's human emotion physically shapes reality. Now, you might be going, what are you talking about, Andy? I get it. We could come from, what the podcast is about. We come from so many different angles to create world-class performance, right? We come from purely neurolinguistics or neuro-retraining, right? Behavioral psychology. We're dealing with the brain, right? Neuroscience. All of that is, I love because it backs up everything I've been teaching for 17 years. That's why I love neuroscience. So that's like the mechanics. The other side of this is we could talk about the universe, if you want to go there, and energy and frequency, okay? We can talk about all of that stuff. We can also talk about quantum physics and the actual principles behind that. And again, there's so much woo-woo out there. It's hard to sometimes say these words without being a little bit cringy, because there's just so much nonsense out there, right? So much nonsense. And I'm as spiritual as you get, and I'm backed by science and wisdom, right? So sometimes it's pretty tricky to talk about that stuff. But really behind the scenes of my life, it's how I live, We use neural retraining, my systems, to program the brain, right? To tune that unconscious part of your brain. And we need the conscious mind to be able to interrupt all of these patterns, right? So when we've got those two things together, that creates alignment. That's congruence. That's where we create massive acceleration. But we can look at the world in so many different ways. So many different ways. Waves, yeah, as well as ways. But we can look at the world in so many different ways, and each one actually changes how we perceive the world or perceive ourselves. We're going to get more into that in a few minutes. I really love this article, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. And speaking of pretty cool, how's life? How's business? Well, want some help? Well, that's what I do. Work with the best in the world, and guess what? Everyone from every different level. And I want to open the invite to you while I can still do these. Well, to jump on a chat with me. You've got to qualify, meaning you've got to be driven, on point, going after something. And, and if you're doing that and you're on about 100K a year, then you could probably work with me personally. And that, for lots of people, actually shocks them. It is. You can. I have different packages for different people. And I only take 1 or 2 people on a month. And if you're lucky enough to come on with me, I'll change your whole damn business and life. Fact, man. That's just a fact. Give me Elon Musk. I'll increase his performance. I guarantee it, man. I guarantee it. So if that's something that interests you, jump into the show notes and definitely click on applying for it. There's so many other links in there. Make sure you're joining me inside the Facebook group, the incubator group. We've got 3,000 people hanging out there. Make sure you're finding me on Instagram. Make sure that you're going to the YouTube channel. Make sure that you've connected with me on LinkedIn. Make sure that you have downloaded the World-Class Performer. It's usually $45 audio, but it's like for $7 right now. What else we got? You got free training there. If you're growing any online business or trying to create any freedom, whatever it is, or whatever level, then there's a training there that I know will help you. And we've also got the 8-Figure Thinker. Do you get the idea? There's so many tools. And I can keep putting tools and systems and everything out that are changing people's lives, and they do. Is it changing yours yet? I don't know. That's a decision. So hit those show notes up, and time to level up. So, let's jump into the show. I'm excited about this one because this one we're going to go a little bit trippy. It could happen, but this is pure science-backed studies. And then we're going to show you a little bit of how to see and think about the world along the way. And who the hell knows where I'll go. But that's the point in the podcast. So make sure you're reviewing it, make sure you're sharing it, and make sure that you are connecting with me somehow, some way. Why? Because we want to make sure that you are living your best life, living your best business. You got freedom, you got money, and guess what else? Yeah, the economy can change, and we want to make sure that you are safe. So now is the time to step up. What's going on, crew? Do you know what? It's so funny. I said about the previous episode about this noise in the city, and I said this is silent, and I'm sitting here just about to press record, and all the horns start going and go, okay, interesting. And also, I want some feedback about that music. You know, not the intro music, Smile For Me. Well, I think that's got to stay, right? It's been going on for about nearly, 5 years we've been doing this podcast. But the music, this little pump-up music, as I call it, before we jump into the show, do you like it? Let me know. Either review it, let me know somehow. You get the idea. So let's jump into this today, because I'm actually quite excited about this topic, because you're going to see, right? New research shocks scientists. Human emotion physically shapes reality. This is from an article I found actually in 2017. And it's by coachcode.com, and I like it, you know. I like the article. So let's get on with it, right? There was 3 different studies, okay, done by 3 different teams of scientists, and they proved something quite incredible. And it's honestly it's quite hard to get your head around. This has been my world for, we're talking like 17 years nearly, so it's easier to get my head around this. But just go with me, because what happened was there's new research connected these 3 discoveries, and it was something shocking was realized, something that was hiding in plain sight. And literally, human emotion shapes the world around us. Not just our perception of the world, but reality itself. And what does that really mean? Because again, that seems so esoteric. It seems so, what does that mean, right? It's not tangible, but this is tangible, what I'm about to say. So listen, we're going to jump into some science. Okay, experiment 1, human DNA. The isolated human DNA in a sealed container. It was placed near the test subject, okay, who they took the DNA from. It was actually placed in the next room, okay? So we're not talking miles away. It's placed in the next room. But listen to this, right? Years ago, this isn't from the article, this is just me. Years ago, they used to think DNA was a fixed structure. They used to think everything was fixed, right? And meaning like our genetic code was locked into place. Blue eyes, brown hair, you got a disease, anything like that. They used to think that was a fixed structure. But what they know about DNA now is that it actually changes. It adapts. It expresses and de-expresses certain genetic codes or genes, right? So first of all, understand that. And when you get more into the universe, the world, how cells work, how atoms work, nothing's fixed. Everything's constantly in a state of change, right? We even look outside and we look at a table or this computer that I'm talking on right now, and guess what? It looks fixed. It looks firm. Yet none of the atoms inside of it that make up the actual structure are not even touching. So nothing is everything's vibrating, everything's changing, everything, and that includes our own DNA and what's happening inside of our body. But listen to this. So what they did was they then affected the donor, the person that was, gave the DNA. And what they did was they put different TVs on, different movies, different sounds, different music, and it was all designed to create different emotion inside of the person, right? So think about that when you're watching movies or whatever you're putting in your head on a daily basis. But listen to what they found. In the presence of negative emotions, the DNA tightened. In the presence of positive emotions, the coils of the DNA relaxed. Now, what does that mean? Well, first of all, just get your head around that. So negative, or the emotion of fear, basically, let's call it that, made the DNA tighten. Okay? Positive made it open. So let's just discuss that for 1 second, right? Think about that when you're afraid. What's your physiology? What's your body language when you're afraid? Is it expressive and open? Nah, man. It's arms across, you're tight, you're protecting. Actually, from a behavioral standpoint, you're actually protecting your vital organs. But besides that, you're tightening, right? So this is the way I think about it. Imagine that from an energetic standpoint, a frequency. Now everything's frequency. It's science today, but it's a little bit down the rabbit hole shit today too, right? So energy, when we are tightening in fear, are you blasting energy out into the world, or are you retracting, right? Are you expressing your abundance? Are you expressing who you're trying to help, pumping content out, whatever you're doing, right? Launching. Or are you resisting? Is that when you go into a sabotage pattern? Is that when you're going into a fear mode or lack of belief or whatever you want to call it? Right. Think about that. When the DNA is immersed in positive emotions, it relaxes and opens up. So what happens when you are relaxed and open up? You got it. Right. You're exactly the same. So when you're opened up and you're positive, what do? You smile, you talk to people, you have energy, motivation, you go after and create results. Make sense? Good, right? That's my little 2 cents worth or $10 worth or whatever you want to call it on top of all of this. But makes sense though, right? It makes sense. So I want you to start thinking about this from how your physiology being, what your mindset is, right? What your focus is, what your beliefs are, what your attitudes are, how you're talking to yourself, and even the language that's going on in your head, who you're around, the food that you're putting in. How is it making you feel, right? If it's pulling you down, then understand from a DNA level perspective right now, what it's doing is it's contracting. We want the opposite. So scientists concluded that the human emotions produces effects which defy conventional laws of physics. Well, we're kind of working that out in physics these days, right, in science, that there isn't anything that is probably real from about 100 years ago. Everything's changed. So imagine people's understanding in 50 years or 100 years from now. It's going to be mind-blowing. So, number 2, that's experiment 2. In the second, similarly unrelated experiment, different groups of scientists extracted white blood cells. Okay, so completely not talking about DNA now, talking about white blood cells from donors and placed it into a chamber that could measure electrical changes, okay? Now, this is really, really cool because the person who gave the DNA was placed in one room and subjected to emotional stimulation like the first people, right? Consisting of video clips, which, pumped out different emotions, okay? So the DNA was placed in a different room in the same building. Both the donor and his DNA were monitored, and the donor exhibited emotional peaks or valleys measured by electrical responses. The DNA exhibited the identical responses at the exact same time. So the white blood cells were affected. The DNA were affected by these emotional changes. And this is the trippy thing, man. There was zero lag time. Do you understand that? No transmission time. Zero. So it was instant. So the emotion was instantly affecting your white blood cells and your DNA structure. That's crazy, right? Think about that. The DNA peaks and valleys exactly matched what was going on, like with each other. And the thing was about this, the scientists wanted to see, that's just what you got to love about scientists sometimes. They wanted to see how far they could separate the donor from his DNA and still get that effect. So what they did was quite cool. After they stopped the testing and basically they took the DNA in the donor and they separated them by 50 miles. Now 50 miles is a reasonable amount, right? If they're taking DNA and bouncing it over there 50 miles away, that's quite far, right? Guess what happened? Exactly the same thing, with zero lag time and no transmission time. Zero. Think about that, right? So the emotion was affecting the body or the DNA and the white blood cells from, it didn't matter. It wasn't even connected. They weren't in the same room. They weren't even next to each other. But yet it was still happening. So the DNA in the donor had the same identical response in time. The conclusion was that the donor and the DNA can communicate beyond space and time. Now, this is where it starts to go into quantum physics. But space-time is obviously that's where Einstein's principle. But what we're trying to talk about is really getting your head around. Yeah, really getting your head around being out of space and time. What does that even mean, right? But think about this. In quantum physics, what they talk about is, again, not in the articles. I probably need to write my own article, right? But what they talk about is theoretical physicists like Einstein. What they do is they don't do much all day. What they do is they ponder. So they have a question and they ponder it and ponder it and ponder it. And what they discovered is something called the incubation process and the creation process. And that's where your mind isn't focused on the future or the past, and you're in between thoughts is when a new possibility appears. That's called superpositioning. But when a new possibility appears, a new idea, a new concept, then you do something called incubating, which is it relevant? What does this mean? But that's where you get a new idea from, okay? That's in between space and time, or time-space. Now, for the finale, right? The third experiment was, well, this is nuts, right? But I love it. And I get it, but it's nuts still. This whole world is like, everything that we're talking about is crazy. It's just that it's like science is catching up and getting glimpses of what's always been. And that's the trippy thing about this, you know? Now, the third is crazy because the scientists observed the effect of DNA in our physical world. Okay, so now we're shifting again. Light photons. Light photons actually make up the world around us. And so what they did was they took these light photons and they put them into a vacuum, okay? Now, their natural locations were completely random, so there was no order, so they put them all these different vacuums, okay? The human DNA was inserted into the vacuum. Shockingly, the photons were no longer acting random. Think about this. They precisely followed the geometry of the DNA. So I know this is hard to get your head around, and it's hard for me to get my head around. We're just opening or expanding our brains, and it might be hurting right now when you start to really think about this. And if it's not hurting right now, then you're not thinking about this enough, man. So, like photons, guess what? Okay, so human DNA was inserted into the vacuum, and they precisely followed the geometry of the DNA. Scientists who were studying this, They described the photons behaving surprisingly and counterintuitively. They went on to say that we are forced to accept the possibility of some new field of energy. They concluded that the human DNA literally shape the behavior of light photons that make up the world around us, okay? So when the new research was done, what they found was all of these three scientific claims were connected together, right? Think about that. We've gone through these three studies. Well, what's it showing? It's showing that the emotion is directly affecting us. And that emotion is directly affecting everything outside of us. So they came to this stunning realization that if our emotions affect our DNA and our DNA shapes the world around us, then our emotions physically change the world around us. Are you getting this? Are you getting this, okay? So we are connected to our DNA beyond time and space. We create our reality by choosing it with our feelings. Do you understand this? Are you understanding this? If your jaw's not open now, if your mind's not like, wow, then you haven't got this. You need to listen to this again or share it with a mate who does understand this. Because this is what I've taught for way over a decade. When we control our mind, we control our emotions. When we control our emotions, what we are literally doing is we're able to step into what I call a peak state or an alter ego, okay? A different version of us. And when we step into that peak version of us, then guess what happens? Well, yeah, the reality around us is literally changing. Do you understand this? So you can be sad. You can be overwhelmed. You can be stressed. And what's going to happen, as I explained before, is your DNA is going to tighten, which to me is going to affect your emotion. It's going to affect how you perceive the reality around you, which is literally what these studies are showing. The emotion affects the reality around us. And when we start to understand that, then we have to take responsibility for this. So what I do for clients and myself is I'm constantly programming the brain or the unconscious mind or the software, the mind muscle, right? To do what? Well, be on autopilot as much as possible. Why? Because if you're in a constant state of like happiness and drive and passion and focus and belief and excitement and all of these things, and your belief about the future is pure abundance and happiness, and every single detail that you're doing is guiding you towards what you want, then literally what this is showing you is your reality around you is going to adapt to it, which is going to affect your DNA, it's going to affect your cells. This study doesn't show that, but then it's going to affect everything. That's how we create results fast, man. Your mind blowing yet? I hope so. Because when we build in the neuroscience and the neuro-retraining and the NLP, and we start really being able to control our mind, emotions, and the actual memories, what does that mean in business? Well, it means that we can hold our focus from 20 minutes to 4 hours, right? We can be able to step into any room and magnetize anyone. You can close deal after deal after deal after deal. Why? Because we're in the right emotion, okay? What else? Well, we can bounce back after a hit. We can stay confident in the most pressurized environment. We can make logical decisions no matter what is going on. We can bypass the overwhelm, the anxiety, the fear, the stress, right? We can get you out of that dark place by literally retraining your brain software, your nervous system. You get the idea, right? So this then changes everything. Because how you're thinking about the future right now is, well, you get the idea, it's connected to everything. So how you're thinking about the future, money, success, happiness, the scalability of this business that you're in, the next deal that you're going to close, the money that you're either fearing or allowing with abundance, right? All of this affects your filter system in your brain. It affects, now we know it affects your biology. We know it affects the reality. So this is not a new concept, but it is a new concept with evidence, okay? So do you see how this might affect your business? Damn right. That's how I help people scale from 5 to 6 figures, 6 to 7, 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 plus. And it's not rocket science, but I've done this for a long time, so I know all the intricate details that require to actually make true change in the brain. Not this bullshit of just pumping you up, right? Feeling good today? Yeah, let's go. High fives. And then the software that's playing underneath it all is like, whatever. And when the willpower wears off or you get triggered, you snap back into this old version of you with those old beliefs, those old focuses. And then guess what? That becomes your wiring. And if you're constantly living in a state of pressure and stress, then we know now that is directly affecting you and it's directly affecting your results. So, making sense? Good. So do you think it's so important to get control of your mind? Yes. Do you think it's so important to get some business strategies? Yes. Do you think it's so important to get a skill set? Absolutely. You can have all the skill sets you want in the world, but without the mindset, it's not going to work. You can have the mindset, the best mindset in the world, but if you don't have the skill set, it's not going to work. Combine them, that's my systems. And that's where we take you to a whole different level that you didn't even know was possible. So whatever's going on in your business now, understand, we can change it so fast, but you got to want it. You got to want it so much because it's like going to the gym. You can pump that muscle with the best personal trainer in the world, and he can show you the most technical details of how to get the perfect lift or whatever you're doing. But if you don't do it, it's not going to work, is it, right? If you go away and then eat pies all day, it's not going to work. So it's the same with this. If you can listen to my podcast again and again, and I hope you do, because I love to do them for you. But the truth is, it's if you don't take any action, it's not going to do anything. If you don't connect with me in some way, it's not going to do anything. And it breaks my heart to see people struggle because there is no need. Now, some months are amazing, some months are not as good, right? That's the nature of being an entrepreneur. But the truth is, we have to move forwards. The truth is, we have to keep getting better. The truth is, we have to lean in, be in growth mode, understand how to control this. Yeah, the mechanics of our brain, this operating system that's playing automatically. Because if we don't, man, I've been through it, 26 years old, putting together a $100 million resort. I went through bankruptcy. I went through nervous breakdowns. I've gone through all of that stuff, and I've rebuilt my life to be one of the best in the world for what I do. And it only comes through experience. It only comes through wisdom. It only comes through to constant growth and constantly pumping that muscle. And it breaks my heart to see people flounder or be in the middle or you know what I mean? I'm not sure if that's where you're at now, but you could be thriving. And if you're pumping, then guess what? Let's damn well make sure that we keep that muscle pumping because we want to make that strong mind even stronger. And if you're just in that dark place right now or you're stuck, then guess what? Oh, man, let's connect. So there we go. There's the end of episode 238. I tried to keep the start much shorter. Hopefully people are liking that. And speaking of liking it, hit those show notes up and click on the link that's right for you now. That's it. Whatever's right for you, whatever level you're trying to step up to or ready to step up to, I got all the options for you. So jump into those show notes and click on the link that's right for you. Make sure that you're writing me a review. Make sure you're sharing this with one person and make sure you're connecting with me somehow. Sound good? Awesome. So you have an incredible week, an amazing day. And oh yeah, one more thing. Why don't you smile for me?
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of the Mindset by Design podcast with your host and NLP expert, Andy Murphy. We'll catch you next time.